Hello out there.
Good afternoon. I'm Debbie Larkin, the author of the soon-to-be-released true crime memoir, A Lovely Girl,
A really good book.
The Tragedy of Olga Duncan and the Trial of one of California's most notorious killers. And I'll be the interviewer today, and John calls it the interrogator.
No, that was me, I think.
John Mullen is the author of the award-winning sci-fi mystery Digital Dick. He has had short stories published in 2 volumes of San Diego Writers, Inc. annual anthology, A Year in Ink. And he's just learned that another of his short stories, The Devil Like Baseball, will be published by Partners of Crime in the San Diego chapter of Sisters in Crime in their anthology entitled Crime Under the Sun. But before I turn it over to John, I want to say that I am honored to be his interrogator today. We have been in the same read and critique group for over 10 years, and as a result, I have been with Nell on her exciting adventure from the inception to today's book release celebration, and I assure you that you're in for a treat. So let's welcome John to talk about his new book, Nell, Marshal of Bodie.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Appreciate you all being here.
First question. Tell us about Nell, Marshal of Bodie.
Okay. The overall.
Right.
Well, it's a historical mystery, if you haven't learned that yet. Takes place in the town of Bodie, California, which is a real town in 1892. Currently, Bodie is a ghost town / state park that I have visited many times. The protagonist of my story, oddly enough, is named Nell Doherty, and her heart's desire is to become a Pinkerton detective. And she believes she can do that even though she has a wooden leg, because she's read stories written by the founder of the Pinkerton Detective Agency about one of his female detectives named Kate Warren, W-A-R-N-E. I may be mispronouncing it. One of the most famous of Kate Warren's exploits was to help Alan Pinkerton surreptitiously get Abraham Lincoln into Washington, D.C. after he was first elected. There was a plot in Baltimore to assassinate Lincoln even then, before he was president. And I think I'll just leave it at that. So the story is about Nell, and I'll leave it there.
Well, could you tell us, how did this book come about? How did you happen to be writing about Bodie and
It's all due to plantar fasciitis. 2001, my numbers are mixed up. I trained for the San Diego Rock and Roll Marathon. I was going to do it as a walker, not a runner. And toward the end of my training, I injured my plantar fascia. I was able to take a few weeks off and get some therapy, and so I was able to finish the marathon. 6 hours, 10 minutes, and 42 seconds. Fast forward to 2008, I had decided to do a bunch of hikes for a week up in the Eastern Sierras near Yosemite. And after 2 days of hiking, I injured my plantar fascia again. A friend of mine had mentioned a nearby state park, Bodie, and I went there and walked the streets and peered in the storefront windows where you can see how things were when the town was abandoned, probably mostly in the 1930s. But there are several saloons with bottles still visible on the countertops, pool tables. There's a general store that's got merchandise on the shelves. The school is still there, intact. Not all the buildings are intact. Some of them are just in terrible shape, and others are just kind of leaning. But I fell in love with the place, and while walking around, an idea came to mind. Why don't I write a mystery that takes place in Bodie? What I don't remember is how I came up with Nell and her having a wooden leg. That's lost. But that's the gist of it. It's all due to plantar fasciitis.
Okay. And would you like to read a passage here?
Oh, if you insist.
It's a reading also.
Okay, so I'm going to read a passage. It's the section of the book where Nell loses her leg, the accident, in which caused the loss of her leg. Okay. It happened on a warm summer's day. I was 12 and my brother Patrick 14. We rode a borrowed wagon from Bodie to a farm near Mono Lake. The day started out well. Do you think Mama will peek when Papa tells her to cover her eyes? I asked. I hope she doesn't guess what her present is. I want to see the surprise on her face. I grabbed Patrick's arm. It will be a big surprise, don't you think? Well, I hope so, after all the trouble Papa's gone to. Mono Lake came into view, sky blue water with a snow-capped peak to its south. Only a few puffy clouds speckled the sky. The scent of blooming sagebrush filled the air. We arrived at the Neely's farm about noon. Mrs. Neely served us lemonade and collected Papa's $45, while Miss Neely and several Paiute Indian workers loaded Mama's birthday present into the wagon. She'd wanted a piano for as long as I could remember. Say hello to your parents, dear, Mrs. Neely said after Patrick and I climbed onto the buckboard. Halfway home, the wagon picked up speed on the backside of a small hill. From behind a bush 20 yards in front of us, a rattlesnake slithered onto the dusty trail. It coiled its body in the middle of the road and rattled its tail. The horse bolted, running over sagebrush as she fled from the snake. Whoa, girl, Patrick yelled. Slow down. He yanked on the reins. I grabbed the seat back, holding on for dear life. Make her stop, Patrick. He stood and leaned backward, tugging harder on the reins. Whoa, dang it, stop. The frightened horse ignored him and headed for a ditch. Jump, Nell, Patrick yelled. I shook my head and held tighter to the seat back. Jump, Patrick yelled again. The horse galloped toward the gully. As the buckboard's front wheels rolled into the ditch, it flipped over. I was thrown from the wagon and my body slammed into the ground. A rock as big as Papa's derby punched me in the ribs and took my breath. Patrick screamed, Look out! Mama's piano cartwheeled toward me. I lay dazed and couldn't move. The piano landed on my right leg. I cringed against the crushing blow. The piano rolled past me, struck a boulder, and burst apart. The strings played a mournful note that stretched on and on. Pain flooded my consciousness. My ribs hurt, but that was nothing compared to my leg. Oh my God. The difference between my ribs hurting and my leg pain was like the difference between sunburned and being scalded with boiling water. It wasn't just the pain. I couldn't move my right foot. Why couldn't I move my foot? Patrick looped his bandana around my right thigh to make a tourniquet. He used one hand and his teeth to tie the knot. He laid a shaking hand on my shoulder. I'm going to get help. No, don't leave me alone. Take me with you. I can't. My arm's broken. Patrick held his arm against his chest. His wrist stuck out at an odd angle. I'm going to fetch the doctor. I'll be back soon as I can. He scrambled up the side of the ditch and was gone. I lay in the dirt in the shadow of a large sagebrush, a few feet from the overturned wagon, alone. Mama, I cried. Get Mama. There was no response. Mama, where are you? I turned on my side, hoping to see Mama coming to save me. The pain in my leg exploded. An army of miners smashed my leg with 10,000 sledgehammers, all in unison, in a 4-beat rhythm. Ta-ta-ta-boom, ta-ta-ta-boom. Every fourth beat, stars exploded in my head. Such pain could only mean one thing. I was dying. I drifted in and out of consciousness, in and out of pain, slipping toward oblivion. I tallied each breath I took, each a miracle, a sign I still lived. The shadows grew longer, and still no one had come. I want you to hold me, Mama. Hold me. Later that afternoon, Papa rescued me from where I lay in the ditch next to that sagebrush. He laid me in the back of a buggy and raced for town. Tears streaked down his cheeks as he carried me up the stairs to Doc Boyle's surgery. "I'm going to put you to sleep," Doc said. When I was out, he sawed off my leg just above the knee.
Thank you. Thank you. That was great. It wasn't too long.
Wasn't too long?
So, what would you say is the most important aspect of writing an historical novel?
The most important thing, I think, is to get the historical details right, which involves a lot, in my case, a lot of reading, multiple trips to Bodie to stare in those windows and walk with docents as they provide tours of different parts of Bodie. I've been on a couple of ghost tours, which has been kind of fun. But that's another aspect of the research, is that can be really a lot of fun. It can be a big rabbit hole, but it can be a lot of fun. And you turn up odd facts. How many of you have ever heard of snowshoes for horses? In one of the museums, I forget, it's either in Bodie or Bridgeport, they have some horse snowshoes on the wall. Other odd things. When I was walking around the different buildings and such, curiosity led me to look inside one of the outhouses, and there were 2 holes, a 2-holer outhouse. And I was very curious about that. And it's only recently, after I really almost finished the book, that I discovered that because the holes were actually 2 different sizes. It wasn't so that you could converse with someone while you're doing your business. It was one for adults and one for children, depending on your size. I also discovered that, and this was fairly early on in my research, that there was a very prominent lawyer in Bodie who only had one arm. That was not where I got the idea for Nell missing a leg, but that was true. Bodie was known as, there was a phrase at the time, the bad men of Bodie. It was supposed to be a very dangerous, bad place. And at times it was. One of the things this lawyer, who only had one arm, did was confront a vigilante mob, the so-called 601 committee, who wound up hanging somebody. And the only one that tried to oppose them was this Patrick Reddy, the lawyer with the one arm. I'm probably babbling now at this point.
That was interesting.
But anyway, you can see the rabbit holes are taking me everywhere.
Okay, the next question is one I wanted to ask because I think it's kind of interesting. Some of your characters have such great names, and I hope I can pronounce all these correctly. Eustace Cole.
That's actually Erastus Cole.
Oh, excuse me. Oh, Erastus Cole. Odysseus. Odysseus.
I'll read it. Odysseus Superbus Snuffins. He's the justice of the peace. Fergus Pogue, he's a bad guy.
And this is my favorite name, this next one.
And Tobias Hurlbutt.
Yeah, I thought that was a really good
He's a saloon keeper, he's a jerk.
Yeah, and they sound very realistic, like those types of names that people might use in 1892. So how did you come up with these great names?
I have a secret source. It's another book. Hang on. Have you read this? Have you read this? Team of Rivals. This is my secret source for names, the index. So when I needed a new character name, I would go to the index and I would write down a list of 6 or 8, 10 first names and then 6 or 8 or 10 last names, and then try to find a pairing that I thought was good for that particular character. So that's where I got these names.
Yeah.
More research.
They're great. Okay. Nell, Marshal of Bodie, is the first of a series. What can you tell us about Nell's future adventures?
Okay.
without spoiling
There'll
them.
be some spoiler alerts, maybe not terribly spoiler, but at this point, I envision a 3-book series, and it theoretically it can go beyond that, I think. Book 2 will take place in Chicago. Nell will get her dream of being hired by the Pinkertons, and while in Chicago, she'll be on the trail of murderers, counterfeiters, and crooked politicians. And I finished the first draft of that book.
Good, I read that too.
Book 3 is just kind of a glimmer in my eye. It's going to take place out in the West again, but not in Bodie. Probably Coeur d'Alene, however you pronounce that, Idaho. And Nell and her female supervisor are going to be sent there to spy on a labor union. And that's about all I know about that book. So I couldn't even give you any spoilers more than that.
Okay, thank you. That concludes your talk.
We're done?
Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you to John. And now he's going to have questions from the audience. So
Oh, yeah. If you have any questions. Hey, Laura. No, they were everywhere. Well, at different times, they had offices across the country and possibly overseas. I'm not positive about that. But the 2 main offices were Chicago and New York. And after Alan Pinkerton died, his 2 sons, I want to say William and I forget the other son's name, each ran a division. The Chicago office handled the West and the New York office the East. Alan Pinkerton was a writer as well as a detective, and I think partially to promote his business, he wrote a number of true crime stories. And as I alluded to earlier, he even included in some of those stories Kate Warren, who, curiously enough, is buried in the Pinkerton family plot. Yeah. Yes, Lana. Well, it's a combination of things. She thinks it's going to be exciting, but also her father was a lawman. And so it's a combination of those 2 things, watching her father and then reading these stories, not just of the Pinkertons, but also Sherlock Holmes and Nick Carter and other mystery type tales of the time. Well, okay.
In case you forgot.
Yeah, I forgot.
That she didn't want to be a teacher.
Yeah.
And
yeah, her mother did not care for the idea of her being a detective at all and insisted she go to school and get a teaching certificate or a credential. I forget what it was called at the time. But Nell was not interested in that. She wanted an adventurous life. So she's gotten it. Danny. A little bit, yes. Nell has a best friend who becomes her partner, who is half Chinese and half Irish. Yeah, and there are some other Chinese characters. In the passage I read, there's an allusion to two Paiute Indians. I don't spend a whole lot of time. I have a black character who's in charge of the telegraph office, but he doesn't play a big role. But it was ethnically very mixed. One interesting thing is that the Chinese, you'll note, typically did things like run laundries or restaurants. They were not allowed to work in the mines. That was no. I believe that was because of the unions wouldn't let them in. Yes, Ken. Yeah. Not yet. I'm not sure. I take it you like Bodie. It's a neat locale. I really have fallen in love with the place. I have joined the Bodie Foundation, and feel free to join yourself, which supports the restoration and the maintenance of the buildings. The state has created a state park, but they're not providing funds to maintain the buildings. That's up to the foundation. Yeah. So, anybody else? Yes. Jerry. You should ask Judy. She can tell you how far off the mark I was. Yeah. Well, there's that. Oh, what? Back mental saying. Well, thank you. People are people, I think. Obviously, there are differences between men and women, and I'm grateful for those. But we face a lot of the same dilemmas and have to make the same kinds of choices about some things. Obviously, men don't have to worry about some things. And, so I don't know. But I did get a lot of help from there are members here from at least 3 or 4 writers groups that I have belonged to who have all helped me with characterization. So I think a lot of it has been little nudges that I get from fellow writers and critiquers. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Anybody else? Yes. Mm-hmm.
So for you as a writer to say, I'm going to write a story about the woman in law enforcement, not even 1920s, but 18th century. Why in the world did you choose that as a writer?
Oh, well, that just seemed like fun. I guess what I'm drawn to are things that I'm curious about, I think. You play the what if game, right, as an author. So what if there was a female detective or female law officer with a wooden leg in Bodie in 1892? I have all kind. I don't know. Maybe all of us have, as writers, crazy ideas, but I want to write a book that takes place in the far east of Russia in 1918, with a nurse protagonist who is part. No, I wish.
Research is on hold.
Yeah, my research is on hold, as Debbie says. I'd actually planned to go to Russia for that book, but didn't quite make it in time. So I don't know if that answers your question, Rick, but okay. But yeah, it's what I'm curious about, which is lots of things.
And then because it is challenging to write a historical novel, writing a historical novel for the women's perspective, writing a historical novel about women's law enforcement, it goes down. Did there ever come a time when you said, this project is too much, I'm done with it, no more? And if so, what drove you to do that?
Well, that usually happens when I'm so fed up. That's the clue that the book is done. Until I get to the editors. Which that's part of my process. So I had 3 different editors look at the book after I was done with my multiple revisions, before I was ready to publish. Yeah. Anybody else?
Any other questions?
Oh, yes. Well, they are very different, yes. One is kind of science fiction-y. To me, I write mysteries, but I write different kinds of mysteries. So yes, it's quite a leap. But I think the explanation is what I've alluded to earlier is that's what I got curious about, was what if there was this 18-year-old young lady with a wooden leg and she became temporary marshal of a gold mining town. That's how I made the leap. Digital Dick came from a different source. That was from Rex Stout. I don't know if you know Rex Stout, but he was, I'm trying to remember. I forgot which is the author's name and which is the Nero Wolfe. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, so Nero Wolfe wrote the Rex Stout stories, in which this really heavy-set character who likes good food and orchids solves crimes by sitting in his office, and Archie, his assistant, brings him the data, and he cranks it out and comes to a solution. And that's similar to what a computer might do if it was smart enough and sentient. And that's where that came from.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, well, let's thank.
Oh, wait a minute. We got one more. I have a favorite. My favorite part of the writing process, I think, is when I'm first getting ideas down on paper. I like that a lot more than the revisions, but you have to do the revisions. I know that. It doesn't mean I don't grit my teeth sometime and look at the same page for the 18th time and say, oh God, this is terrible. I need to fix that. But yeah, so what I enjoy most is the initial getting it down on paper. Well, and actually, if I can amend that, my very, very, very favorite thing is when out of the blue, something will happen that is just perfect. Like in Nell, Nell book 2. So this is a, whoops. I had a character. Well, I have Nell in Chicago, and she's taking the trolley back and forth all the time, too many times. So I had to do something different with the trip she was going to take on the trolley again. And so I thought, I'll have a guy come and sit down next to her and hit on her. He became an important character. Just, I don't know what. So that is the ultimate satisfaction to me, is those kinds of things.
You create characters that have a mind of their own.
Yeah, oh, they do, yes. Yeah.
So, any other questions? Okay, well, let's thank John for being here and today.
Thank you very much for being here. You.
Yeah, thanks a lot.